Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for making it to this event, the first in a series we hope will continue for many years. Dakshin Dialogues. The subject before us today is building consensus on federalism and the role of judiciary. We have some outstanding intellectuals and outstanding speakers in the panel. The topic presents very interesting opportunities, possibilities. Building consensus, which is in some ways primarily political, it's arguably the more challenging. It's a process that has never been easy. So much so, I like to believe that it's a little like the man in Greek mythology, Sisyphus, who was asked to roll a stone up a hill, and when it rolled down again, to start all over again. So it is extraordinarily challenging. The second part of the topic is about judiciary's role in federalism. Again, it's a very important one and involves upholding principles of federalism enshrined in the Indian Constitution, and perhaps a good measure of judicial activism would be necessary to protect any encroachment in law or in spirit. The third element of federalism, and perhaps a very important one, striking one that every state is made aware of, is finances. And we often find that states are very dependent on the center. And I hope to be able to explore the possibility with Mr. Isaac, how states can become more financially autonomous. Our panel, as you can see, is uniquely positioned to address all these issues and more. It consists of two legal luminaries, and very popular elected leader, and an outstanding mind, judicial mind. So without further ado, I would like to get the conversation going with Mr. Owaisi. As a strong representative of the minority community, you perhaps have an extraordinary role in building consensus, perhaps because other parties, communities may have less incentive to do so. How would you approach this task, given all the challenges? And do you think there is some common ground which will kind of help all the political parties in the South unite?
Well, uniting all political parties in South is not my domain, I'm too small. So uniting the South parties, I think our state chief minister is playing a role in that. But as far as federalism, the topic is concerned, I am, as a student of politics and law, I am more perplexed by the present union government and the present Prime Minister's statements. We know what federalism, Bomai judgment is there, but when the Prime Minister talks about cooperative federalism, I don't know what cooperative federalism means. Then he goes ahead and he changes to competitive cooperative federalism. It's like saying that this javelin thrower who got us a gold, he should help his competitor to also get a gold. So that we don't know, the federalism is federalism. It cannot be cooperative, it cannot be competitive federalism. So the little I know about federalism is that the Supreme Court, the Constitution has earmarked states and the center's role. But here you have a government in center who wants one nation, one fertilizer also now. So I don't know how we can get around to that. Unfortunately, the judiciary also had been lacking, like for example, Article 370. It has not yet been heard. Then 80 lakh people were basically imprisoned in their homes without any net. Nothing really happened. So building a consensus is when a government at center, appreciates and understands the spirit of federalism. But if they are hell-bent on having one nation, one tax, one nation, one fertilizer, and not believing in diversity, and ensuring the states become subservient to them, then that is, I think we have a huge challenge in front of us.
Do you have any specific suggestions for building consensus?
Well, the only thing politically I can say is that the states must come together. Especially the states in the south must come together and protest and not get bogged down, because you see, this is going to be a death knell for states if the government goes ahead with the Electricity Amendment Act, because my state, whether we like it or not, Telangana had more hand pump sets before the formation of Telangana. Now, if you have Electricity Amendment Act, it's going to be huge problem for us. So, I think the politically, yes, we'll have to come together. And if you have an industry coming to Maharashtra, having one meeting, going to another state, these are huge problems which should be taken out, which should be taken on politically, and the states must come together. But unfortunately, you have more number of states which are ruled by BJP, and everyone is keeping quiet. But in the long run, this will definitely harm federalism. It will harm the constitution. It will harm the center and state relations.
Justice Chelameswar, you've heard Mr. Owaisi being a little skeptical about the judiciary, about how well it can protect federalism. What do you think? What do you think is the state of affairs, and what kind of a role do you envision for the judiciary?
See, the first statement that whether the judiciary will be able to protect, or will it protect the federalism in this country, in my opinion, is an absurd statement. Federalism is a political arrangement. Judiciary is a part of a federal system. Now, the question of judiciary protecting or not protecting does not arise. If the political elements of the federation do not work out the federal system properly, no constitution, no judiciary, no judge can ever save it. Now, as regard the skepticism of Mr. Owaisi, well, of course, questions are always there in any democratic society. Questions are there, debate is inevitable, and no institution is perfect. Yes, everything. But then, to improve the situation, a constant debate is required, and a constant effort is required by all the stakeholders. And the greatest stakeholders in any democratic system are the people and their representatives, ultimately. In other words, the politicians. If they do not play their role the way they ought to play it, well, things start slipping away from their hands.
Mr. Isaac, state financial autonomy is a very key aspect of federalism, and we have frequently see that states are not fully financially autonomous, and they often have to depend on aid from the government in terms of revenues sharing. There are issues of several disputes. What do you think is the way forward?
Well, I think minimum that is required is that everybody accept the diversity of India. Unfortunately, we have a regime in the country that just does not accept the diversity. The nationhood is defined sans diversity. Now that's the key problem. Once you are willing to accept I feel as strong as an Indian as much as I feel as like a Malayali, well, then I think there's a ground for going to a consensus. Now, when it comes to finance, the constitution itself provided for the center to be, say, mobilizing resources, the higher upper hand. about 60% of the resources are mobilized by center, while the development functions are more in the hands of the states. And therefore, there's a constitutional mechanism of transferring resources from the center to the states. Now, this mechanism is being undermined. In fact, the transfer is increasingly becoming arbitrary. For example, the huge resources which were once, distributed by or determined by the Planning Commission is now arbitrarily determined by the Finance Ministry and given to states as packages on basis of no objective criteria. And states' fiscal space is being squeezed in terms of its borrowing facility, in terms of raising additional revenue through taxes. So, virtually the states are increasingly becoming like municipal governments, the status they once used to have. I personally feel we have been lucky because of COVID. Otherwise, the award of the 15th Finance Commission would have been very different, disastrous for the states. So it hangs like a Damocles sword. And, well, what is the way forward? I think way forward is indicated by what happened in the 15th Finance Commission. There was a big resentment against the terms of reference, particularly among the southern states, and later some other states from the north also joined in. And we had a series of seminars, there were 7 consultations, the 6th consultation, different parts of the country. And I think it did moderate the stance of the central government as well as the Finance Commission. I think that's the way forward. Therefore, I find this consultation very, very valuable.
What are your thoughts on this debate over freebies? Now, does that impinge on state autonomy?
Yeah. Today, my column piece in Indian Express is about the freebies. Well, I think it is best left to be determined by the electorate. There is already a restriction how much freebies you can give. Freebies are all revenue expenditure, and the FRBM Act says you cannot spend your borrowed money on revenue expenditure. There is a serious constraint. But there's a sharp asymmetry between how center has approached freebies and states have. States have been very responsible. Say on the eve of COVID, the states were surplus. Not only had they eliminated the revenue deficit, they were surplus. While center, no single year since the FRBM has eliminated revenue deficit. And why do they run revenue deficit? Because revenues foregone to the corporates and rich, because they have chosen to reduce the corporate tax by 1.5 lakh crores rupees. They have chosen to write off. Of course, one is upset about the freebie to the farmers, but nobody is worried about freebies given to the corporates or 10 lakh crores rupees which have been waived off from the banks. So there is a big asymmetry between the center and state, and surprisingly, this freebies is now taken up by the center as a tool to browbeat the states. who have been complying with it.